Namaste and a very good morning, India.
Welcome to your Daily Explainer, where we go beyond the headlines to give you the full story. It's Tuesday, August 12th, 2025. Today, we're not just reading the news, we're connecting the dots. We'll start on the halls of power, then check the pulse of the economy and what it means for your wallet. After that, we'll explore the stories shaping our society, and finally, we'll look at India's place on the world stage. Let's get right into it.
So we're kicking things off in the political arena. We're looking at some really foundational stuff here. How laws get made, how people protest, and that all-important question of who holds power accountable. These are the stories that really define the contract between the state and you, the citizen.
All right, our lead story from Parliament is a legislative whirlwind. I mean, get this, 6 major bills, including a whole new income tax bill and a big one on sports governance, just sailed through both houses without a single minute of debate. Now, the government's line is that their hands were tied, that the opposition's protests made business as usual impossible. But the real story, our take here, is the dynamic this creates. You have to ask, are these protests, whether they mean to or not, actually providing the perfect political cover, a way for the government to push through massive laws without the usual scrutiny? It really leaves us with a huge question. Is this just an efficient way to govern in a chaotic environment, or does it start to erode the very process of democracy?
And that opposition anger wasn't just inside Parliament. It spilled out onto the streets of the capital. We saw a protest march, led by Rahul Gandhi and other senior leaders from the India bloc, get stopped in its tracks. The MPs were even briefly detained. So what was this all about? They were heading to the Election Commission to protest the way electoral rolls are being revised in Bihar. Now, this isn't just some boring administrative update. The fear they're voicing is pretty serious. They're worried this could be a test run for what they call a nationwide voter purge, kind of like the controversial NRC in Assam. They believe the new rules could strip voting rights from millions of real citizens, especially the poor, who might not have all the right papers. This takes a state issue and blows it up into a national fight over the very idea of a fair election.
While politicians are fighting on the streets, another battle over dissent has just ended in the Supreme Court. The court upheld the criminal defamation conviction of the veteran activist Mehta Patkar. Now, this case is an old one, stretching all the way back to the Sardar Sarovar Dam protests in 2001. But the verdict is incredibly relevant today. By upholding this conviction, the court has basically reinforced that criminal defamation is a powerful tool that can be used against critics, journalists, and activists. The worry, summed up in that quote, is that it creates a chilling effect. It makes people think twice before speaking out against powerful people or projects. Because who wants to be stuck in a costly legal battle for years?
Our next story really boils down to one word: accountability. We're talking about the reappointment of a Director General of Police, K. Ramachandra Rao. What's the big deal? Well, this is the same official who was put on compulsory leave after his name came up in a major gold smuggling case, a case that also allegedly involved his stepdaughter. Now, the state government has just reversed that decision and put him back in his powerful post. It effectively brushes aside the serious cloud of suspicion that's still hanging over him. This raises some really tough questions about the line between politics and policing. How can the public trust law enforcement when serious allegations like these seem to just disappear? It's a real test of the system that's supposed to keep our institutions clean.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about money. This section is all about the economy, what the big markets are doing, what companies are planning, and most importantly, what it all means for you and your wallet.
24,550. Remember that number. That's the new high the Nifty 50 just smashed through, while the Sensex also jumped over 700 points. So why are the markets on such a tear? Analysts say it's a mix of good signs globally, but the real engine is a powerful sense of optimism right here at home. It seems like the market is making 2 big bets. First, they think the RBI is going to cut interest rates soon, which would make it cheaper for companies to borrow and grow. And second, there's just a strong belief that our own domestic economy is strong enough to handle whatever the world throws at it. It's a huge wave of optimism for sure, but we also got to remember there are still worries about things like global trade tariffs, so this good mood could change fast.
Now, from the highs of the market to something that hits a little closer to home, your budget. Your health insurance premium is probably about to go up, a lot. Insurers are asking for the biggest average price hike we've seen in over 5 years. And this chart really tells the story. Before COVID, hikes were pretty low, pretty manageable. Then you see that second bar, the pandemic hit and claims went through the roof, putting a huge strain on insurance companies. And now for 2025, they're asking for that really steep increase you see in the third bar. They say it's a double whammy. They're still paying out a high number of claims post-pandemic, and they're dealing with soaring medical inflation. You know, the rising costs of everything from hospital rooms to new medicines. The bottom line, the financial aftershocks of the pandemic are finally hitting your insurance policy.
Over in the banking world, AU Small Finance Bank is about to get a major promotion. It's just received what's called an in-principle approval from the RBI to become a universal bank. This is a total game changer for them. As a small finance bank, its focus was narrow, lending to small businesses, farmers, helping with financial inclusion. But as a universal bank, all those restrictions fall away. It can now play in the big leagues, offering every kind of service and competing directly with the giants like HDFC, ICICI, and SBI. It's a sign of a new, more competitive era in Indian banking, and it's a pretty cool story of a smaller bank making it to the top tier.
Okay, now let's zoom in on the stories that make up the fabric of our society. This is where we talk about issues that affect our communities, our health, our environment, and some incredible stories of the human spirit.
The Supreme Court has issued another major order, and this one could really change daily life in the Delhi NCR. Responding to concerns about public safety and dog bites, the court has ruled that all stray dogs must be moved to shelters within just 8 weeks. And here's the crucial part: they must not be released back into their old territories. This creates what's being called a legal paradox. Why? Because it directly contradicts the government's own long-standing rules, which are all about trapping, neutering, and then returning dogs. And beyond the legal mess, think about the logistics. It's a nightmare. Where will tens of thousands of animals go? The cities don't have the space, the money, or the staff. It's a really complex situation, putting public safety concerns in direct conflict with animal welfare.
And now for a truly powerful story of resilience from Bihar. It's a state where child marriage is still a huge problem. This timeline tells the story of one woman. At just 14 years old, she was forced to marry a much older man. Her childhood was just gone. But that's not where her story ends. Today, she's taken that incredibly difficult personal experience and turned it into a mission. She works right there in her own community, raising awareness, talking to parents, and actually stopping child marriages from happening. It's an amazing example of how someone can turn their deepest pain into their greatest strength, becoming a real force for change from the inside out.
Okay, this next one is a heads up for every parent out there. A new, big study has found a strong link between kids spending too much time in front of screens and a higher risk of heart problems later in life. Now, it's important to be clear, this kind of study shows a connection, not a direct cause and effect, but it's another heavy piece of evidence on a growing pile. The concern isn't just that kids are sitting around more, it's a mix of things. Less time for active play, messed up sleep patterns from all that blue light, and maybe even stress from what they're watching. The takeaway is pretty stark. The habits our kids are forming with screens right now could have serious health consequences down the road.
Up in the hills of Uttarakhand, a classic battle is playing out: development versus nature. And the National Green Tribunal, or NGT, is stepping in to act as the referee. It's looking into a new rule from the state government that seems to weaken the environmental protections for the very fragile Dune Valley. This case is about a fundamental conflict. On one side, you have the push for more business, more hotels, more construction. On the other, you have conservation rules put in place by the courts specifically to protect the valley's delicate ecosystem. The NGT's involvement is so important because it acts as a check on state power, reminding the government of its duty to protect our environment for the long run.
Now for a story about a different kind of national security, the security that comes from innovation. The Indian Army is teaming up with IIT Madras to launch a new research cell called Agni Shoth. The name literally means trial by fire, which tells you everything you need to know about its purpose. The idea is to break away from the old, slow way of doing defense research. Instead of having scientists in isolated labs, Agni Shoth creates a direct link between the soldiers on the front lines and the brilliant minds at a top engineering school. The goal is to be fast and agile,
quickly developing solutions in hot areas like AI, drones, and cybersecurity to keep our military ahead of the curve.
For our final section, let's zoom out and look at India on the world stage. We're talking about how our country is handling global challenges, from diplomatic spats to major international negotiations.
This quote pretty much says it all. It perfectly captures how India responded to some recent nuclear-related comments from Pakistan's army chief. Instead of getting into a heated argument, India's Ministry of External Affairs just brushed it off. They officially called the comments stock and trade saber-rattling. That's diplomatic speak for, we've heard this all before. This "we're not impressed" attitude is a very deliberate strategy. It shows that India isn't going to be drawn into a shouting match or be intimidated by rhetoric. It's a way of projecting confidence and calming things down by simply refusing to play the game.
Moving to climate change talks, there's a new number on the table, a target of $300 billion a year by 2035 for developed nations to help the developing world go green. And what was India's reaction? Basically, thanks, but no thanks. It's not nearly enough. India's official response was that the amount is substantially insufficient. From New Delhi's point of view, $300 billion is just a drop in the ocean compared to what's actually needed. We're talking about trillions of dollars to shift entire economies to clean energy and to build infrastructure that can withstand climate change. This really highlights that huge, ongoing disagreement between richer and poorer nations over who should pay for the climate crisis.
Now to a major story out of the US that has people in democracies everywhere paying close attention. President Trump has deployed the National Guard in Washington, D.C. and has taken federal control over the city's police. The official reason is a rise in crime. But this is a really big deal because D.C. isn't a state, it's a federal district. This gives the president powers there that he doesn't have in other cities. Critics are calling it a power grab, saying the government is using law and order as an excuse to take direct control of the nation's capital, pushing aside the city's own elected leaders. It's a major test of the balance of power in America.
Things are heating up again in the South China Sea. China's Coast Guard announced it has expelled several Philippine ships from the area around the Scarborough Shoal. This little piece of land is a major flashpoint, claimed by both countries but controlled by China. This isn't just a one-off incident. It's part of China's long-term strategy to enforce its claim over almost the entire sea, a claim that was actually rejected by an international court. By making these actions public, Beijing is sending a very clear message. We're not backing down, and we will use our power to enforce what we see as our territory.
And finally, we turn to Gaza, where an Israeli airstrike has killed an Al Jazeera journalist named Anis al-Sharif. And we are left with two completely opposite stories. The Israeli military is claiming that he wasn't just a journalist, but also a Hamas operative. But Al Jazeera and press freedom groups are fiercely denying this. They accuse Israel of deliberately targeting reporters, of trying to silence journalists in order to control what the world sees and hears from the conflict. It's a tragic reminder of the incredible dangers journalists face in war zones and the fierce battle that rages over information itself.
And that wraps up our deep dive. We've covered 17 stories today, from the floors of Parliament to the South China Sea, from tough questions about our police to an incredible story of personal strength in Bihar. We truly hope that by giving you the facts and the context, without bias or spin, we've helped you make sense of it all. The only way we can keep doing this is with support from listeners like you. So if you find this valuable, please share it with your friends and family. Your support really does fuel our mission.
One day, 17 different stories. The big question is, which one of these will be the one that shapes our tomorrow? Follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this podcast every morning at 8 a.m. Until then, keep smiling. Namaskar.